Okay, let's dive right into this. Back in 2011, European football essentially declared war on its own spending. The weapon of choice? Financial fair play. Now, the promise was incredibly simple. Clubs would only be allowed to spend the money they actually earned. That was it. No more billionaire owners pumping in endless cash just to buy trophies. No more clubs racking up massive debts they could literally never repay. A level playing field. Finally. Right? Well, that was the promise. But here's the reality.
The richest club in England has been sitting under more than 100 charges for over 3 years now, and as of today, zero verdicts. Nothing. Meanwhile, UEFA once banned that exact same club from Europe, only to watch a court completely tear that ban up just months later. We've got smaller clubs getting points deducted and nearly relegated, while another club admits to hidden payments during a trophy-winning era and walks away without losing a single point. So here's the massive question this whole explainer is built around. If the punishments just don't land, if the rules get rewritten in courtrooms, and if the biggest spenders just keep winning anyway, is financial fair play actually dead? Well, let's walk through exactly how we got here.
Section 1, 2011, The Break-Even Dream.
So rewind with me to the late 2000s. European football is absolutely drowning in red. I mean, ignore the warning signs levels of spending. Clubs are bleeding money on a scale that is genuinely scaring regulators. We're talking billions of euros across the continent. Some historic clubs are literally one bad season away from going entirely bust. To stop the bleeding, UEFA, led by Michel Platini, brought in financial fair play. It was designed as this strict disciplinary framework for a sector where financial mismanagement was just normal. The goals were straightforward: protect the long-term survival of the clubs and restore a competitive balance. The absolute core of it all was the break-even rule. Basically, constraining clubs to spend within their means and preventing them from living wildly above their budgets while waiting for a billionaire bailout. But almost immediately, the lawyers started circling. And one of them was actually the same lawyer behind the famous Bosman ruling. You know, the case that totally rewrote football's transfer system back in the 90s? Yeah, his argument was blunt. He claimed that restricting how these clubs spend their money could actually breach European competition law. From day one, you have to understand, financial fair play wasn't just a sporting rule book. It was a massive legal target. Remember that, because it kind of becomes the whole story.
Section 2, The Loopholes.
Look, the moment you write a financial rule, an absolute army of accountants gets paid very good money to find the gaps in it. And oh, they found plenty. It was like a heist. There were 3 primary methods clubs used to magically create profit out of thin air. First up, inflated sponsorships. Clubs would ramp up their income with related party sponsorships, essentially getting companies owned by their own owners to pay way over market value. Second, amortization tricks. They'd spread the cost of a mega transfer over these massive long-term contracts to lower the annual hit on the books, or they'd use wildly inflated player swaps to book artificial capital gains. In fact, the data shows they were reporting player sales on their financial statements at values increased by almost a fifth compared to actual market value.
And then there's loophole number 3, which is honestly almost too on the nose. If a club suddenly needs to magic up some profit to stay compliant with the rules, they just sell an asset, a hotel, a car park, maybe even their own women's team. But they sell it to a company owned by the exact same people who own the club. The club books a really tidy profit, but the money never actually left the family. One Premier League club famously did exactly this with hotels and its women's team just to stay on the right side of the ledger. That gap eventually got closed too, but you get the idea. 3 loopholes, 3 ways the spirit of the rule was driven straight off a cliff while the strict letter of the law stayed perfectly intact. Which brings us to the case that put all of this on trial. Section 3, the case that broke the system open. And this is where the reality gets much colder. The year is 2018. A German magazine publishes a massive trove of leaked internal football documents. We're talking emails, spreadsheets, contracts, the exact kind of stuff clubs never expect to see the light of day. Among the wildest allegations, that Manchester City had deliberately dressed up owner money as sponsorship income, exactly the loophole we just talked about, just to satisfy UEFA's break-even rule. Well, UEFA investigated and they came down incredibly hard. In early 2020, their financial control body actually banned City from European competition for 2 full years, slapping them with tens of millions of euros in fines. It was huge, the biggest enforcement moment in FFP history. Finally, the system had teeth. But just months later, a court reverses the ban entirely. And today, the club is facing 115 domestic charges that are, incredibly, still pending. Section 4, same rulebook, very different outcomes. While that massive city case just sat there in limbo, the Premier League was running its own domestic version of these rules, known as the Profitability and Sustainability Rules, or PSR. The magic number here was £105 million. That's the maximum a club could lose over a rolling 3-year window. Go over that line and you face brutal sanctions, including the absolute nuclear option, a points deduction. But look at the deep, fundamental unfairness of how this actually played out. On one side, you have clubs that slipped slightly over the line and got hit with deducted points and total relegation panic, strict, unforgiving enforcement. But on the other side, you have escaped clubs that straight up admitted to hidden payments, heavily lawyered up to fight the charges, and lost absolutely 0 points. It created this incredibly toxic environment where your outcomes seem to depend way more on the size of your club and the firepower of your legal team than on the actual rulebook. And honestly, that is the deeper failure here. It was never just about clever accountants finding loopholes. It was about a system where the punishment depended on your size, your lawyers, and the hyper-specific technical route your overspending took, rather than a clear, consistent principle that everyone could actually trust. As the saying goes, a rule that's applied inconsistently isn't really a rule. It's negotiation. The Premier League knew it. Everyone knew it, which is exactly why they just tore the whole thing up. Section 5, PSR is out and SCR is in. So, in late 2025, Premier League clubs officially voted to scrap PSR entirely and bring in a brand new system starting in the 2026-27 season. The headline here is the squad cost ratio. Under these new squad cost rules, clubs are only allowed to spend a maximum of 85% of their total revenue on player wages and transfers. That leaves the remaining 15% to cover all other club operations. It's supposed to be a much more forward-looking perspective, tied directly to revenue. The goal is to introduce a realistic target that clubs can actually meet, while placing far greater, intense scrutiny on anyone trying to artificially inflate their costs through those related party loopholes. But they also tried to introduce a hard salary cap alongside it, and guess what happened? It was killed on the spot. Exactly 14 out of the 20 clubs voted it down. The elite clubs completely opposed it, which absolutely proves that the biggest clubs still hold the keys and control the spending ceilings. As plenty of researchers and analysts have already pointed out, without a global salary cap, sure, you might get a bit more financial solvency across the board, but you don't really get any true increase in competitive balance. Oh, and before these new rules even reached a final vote, the players' unions and the major agencies were already lining up to drag the whole thing straight back into the courtroom. Their argument? They're claiming this ratio is just a salary cap in disguise. Does that sound familiar? Because we are right back exactly where we started in 2011. Any rule that seriously limits spending immediately gets met with a massive lawsuit. Section 6. So, is FFP dead? Honestly, in its original form, absolutely yes. The name is gone, that pure break-even dream is totally gone, and the system that was supposed to enforce it all got completely out-lawyered, out-accounted, and applied so inconsistently that it lost every ounce of trust from the very clubs it governed. But the idea behind it, that never really died. It just keeps getting rebranded. Break-even became profitability and sustainability. PSR became squad cost ratio. Every new version tries to be a little smarter, a little faster, a little harder to dodge. And yet, every single version runs headfirst into the exact same walls, which leaves the sport staring down a genuinely impossible choice. Option 1, keep tightening the rules, fight endless, exhausting lawsuits, and try desperately to protect competition from runaway billionaire money. Or option 2, just admit that spending can't really be controlled. Let the free market run wild and stop pretending the playing field was ever actually level to begin with. There is absolutely no obvious right answer here. And honestly, the people running the game can't agree either. So I want to hand it over to you. Tell me in the comments, do you think these new squad cost rules will actually work? Or is this just FFP with a fresh coat of paint? I'll read the replies, and the absolute best argument I see is going to be featured in the next explainer. If you made it this far, you clearly care about the money and the politics of the game way more than most. So do yourself a favor and subscribe, because this story is nowhere near over. That massive Manchester City verdict still hasn't dropped. And the moment it does, everything we've just covered in this explainer could literally change overnight. Be here when it lands. See you next time.